The Great Hall of the Throne of Stars was the largest structure ever built in the known galaxy. It floated in the darkness between three star systems, a meeting place for the most powerful beings in existence. Its walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft light. Its floors were polished stone taken from dead worlds, and on this day it was filled with laughter. 5 commanders sat around a circular table made of pure energy. They were the rulers of the hegemony of 5, an alliance that had controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Every species that mattered answered to them. Every world that held value belonged to them. They had never known defeat, and they had never known fear. Commander was the first to speak. He was a creature with 4 arms and a head covered in sharp mandibles. His black eyes reflected no light, and his voice was a series of clicks and hisses that his translator turned into words. His species believed they were the chosen rulers of the universe, and believed it more than most. "Play the recording again," he demanded. "I want to see their ships one more time." A hologram appeared above the table. It showed a small fleet of vessels moving through space. The ships were boxy and gray. Their hulls were covered in visible seams where metal plates had been welded together. Small turrets dotted their surfaces, and engines at the back glowed with blue fire. These were human warships. Let out a sound that his translator could not process. It was pure mockery. "They still use chemical engines," he said. "They burn fuel like primitives burning wood. How are they even alive in space?" Admiral Anna smiled at his words. She was an Etherian, a tall and slender being with skin like pale moonlight and eyes that glowed purple. Her species could touch minds across vast distances. They could sense thoughts and feelings like others sensed heat and cold. She found humans to be the most boring creatures she had ever encountered. "Their minds are empty to me," she said. "I cannot feel them at all. They move through the universe blind and deaf to the psionic field. They are like animals stumbling through a garden they cannot see." Warlord Ash slammed his fist on the table. He was a massive creature covered in thick gray skin and ritual scars. His species lived for battle. They had conquered 100 worlds before joining the hegemony, and they still hungered for more. He looked at the human ships with disgust. "These are not warriors," he growled. "Look at their formation. It is defensive, careful, they fear combat. My youngest soldiers could destroy this fleet in an afternoon." High Arbiter said nothing at first. He was a being of pure logic and calculation. His body was thin and gray, his face without expression. His species had removed emotion from their genetic code thousands of years ago. They believed that feeling was a weakness, and that pure reason was the only path to truth. "I have analyzed their technology," said in a flat voice. "Their weapons are kinetic. They fire pieces of metal at high speed. Their shields are electromagnetic. Their fastest ships can travel at only 12 times the speed of light. By every measure, they are the weakest spacefaring species in the galaxy." The final commander leaned back in his chair. Fleet Marshal was the oldest being at the table. He was an ascended, a creature that was part flesh and part machine. His species had been modifying their bodies for 50,000 years. They remembered things that other species had forgotten. They had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a shore. Watch the human ships on the hologram. Something about them made him uncomfortable, though he could not say why. There was a feeling in his ancient circuits, a warning from deep in his memory banks. But the feeling was faint, and he pushed it aside. "They are young," said. "They have been traveling between stars for only 200 years. They do not know the ways of the galaxy. Perhaps we should teach them." Clicked his mandibles in agreement. "Yes, let us teach them their place. They have spread to 12 worlds already, 12 worlds that could belong to us. I say we send them a message." "What kind of message?" Anna asked. "The only kind primitives understand," Ash answered. "A demand, surrender or die." Nodded slowly. "Logic supports this approach. Humans cannot defeat us. They will calculate the odds and accept the rational choice. They will surrender." The 5 voted. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would be given a simple choice. They would give up their colonies. They would disband their fleet. They would accept the protection of the hegemony, which meant they would serve the hegemony in all things. In return, they would be allowed to live. A single ship was sent to Earth with the ultimatum. It was a small courier vessel, barely armed. The hegemony did not think humans deserved a proper diplomatic delegation. They sent the message like a master sending orders to a servant. The courier arrived at Earth and broadcast the demands to every human receiver. The message was clear. Humanity had 30 standard days to respond. If they refused, the hegemony would come with fire and fury. If they accepted, their submission would be noted and their worlds would be taken peacefully. The five waited for an answer. They expected begging. They expected desperate attempts to negotiate. They expected humans to act like every other weak species they had ever crushed. But the days passed and no answer came. At first, the five thought the humans were simply slow. Their communication technology was primitive, after all. Perhaps they needed time to process the message. Perhaps their leaders were arguing among themselves. But 30 days became 60 days. 60 days became 90 days, and still there was only silence. Grew angry, Anna grew curious. Ash grew hungry for war, grew confused because human silence did not match his calculations, and felt that strange warning again, that faint signal from his ancient memory. He had felt this before, long ago, when his ancestors had faced something terrible. But that was impossible. That enemy was gone, they had made sure of it. The hegemony decided to send scouts to human space. They would discover what the silence meant. They would find out why the humans had not responded. The scouts never returned. And in the darkness of space, far from the eyes of the hegemony, humanity was preparing its answer. 3 months had passed since the ultimatum, and the hegemony of five was growing restless. In all their long history, no species had ever ignored them. Weak races begged for mercy. Strong races tried to negotiate, but silence was something new. Silence was an insult that none of the five could understand. Paced back and forth in his command chamber aboard the great hive ship Endless Hunger. His 4 arms moved constantly, a sign of agitation among his kind. He had sent 12 scout ships to human space. None of them had returned. None of them had even sent a final message. "They are hiding," he told his advisors. "The humans are cowards. They have buried themselves in holes and are hopping. We will forget about them." But even as he said the words, felt doubt crawling in his stomach. Cowards did not capture scouts. Cowards did not create silence. Something was wrong, and he did not know what. Far across the galaxy, Admiral Anna sat in meditation aboard her flagship, the Whisper of Eternity. Her eyes were closed, and her mind was stretched across the stars, searching for the thoughts and feelings of living creatures. She could sense the busy minds of her crew. She could feel the distant emotions of billions of beings on 100 worlds. But where human space should have been, there was nothing. It was not the natural emptiness that humans always projected. Anna was used to their strange mental silence, their inability to touch the psionic field. This was different. This was a void, as if someone had cut a hole in the fabric of reality itself. She opened her eyes and spoke to her second in command. "Something is wrong with the humans." "Wrong, admirals. I cannot explain it. They have always been invisible to my senses. But now the space they occupy feels wrong. It feels like they are hiding something so large that it bends the universe around it." Her officer looked confused. Perhaps they have developed psionic shielding. Anna shook her head. "Humans cannot use psionics. They are blind to it. They could not build such a shield." She paused and looked out at the stars. "No, they are doing something else, something I do not understand." On the fortress world of Warlord, Ash was growing impatient. He sat on his throne of bones, surrounded by his greatest warriors. Maps of human space covered the walls, marked with targets and invasion routes. "We have waited long enough," he growled. "The humans spit on our demands, they kill our scouts, and we sit here doing nothing." His war chief, a veteran named Tor, stepped forward. "The High Council has ordered us to wait. They say we must gather more information before we strike." "Information?" Ash stood up and towered over his advisor. "I need no information. I know everything I need to know. Humans are weak. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are primitive. We could crush them in a single campaign." "Then why haven't we?" Tor asked quietly. Ash opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. It was a good question. Why were they waiting? Why were the five hesitating? They had destroyed stronger enemies with less discussion. They had conquered entire sectors on nothing more than a whim. But something about the human silence made even Ash pause. It was not fear, did not feel fear. It was something else. It was the instinct of a predator sensing that the prey was not acting like prey. In the calculation halls of the High Arbiter was running his numbers for the 100th time. His species had built the most powerful computers in the galaxy. They could predict the movement of stars. They could calculate the probability of events millions of years in the future. But they could not explain the human silence. The probability of human resistance is 0.003%, said to his council. Their industrial capacity is insufficient for a military response. Their population is too small to absorb significant losses. Their technology is too primitive to threaten our forces. Logic dictates that they have accepted their fate. Then why do they not respond? Asked one of his advisors. Unknown, admitted. Perhaps their communication systems have failed. Perhaps their government has collapsed. Perhaps they are engaged in internal conflict. Or perhaps they are planning something. Considered this possibility and rejected it. Planning requires resources. Humans do not have the resources to plan anything that could threaten us. They are simply delaying the inevitable. But even as he spoke, felt something that his species had thought they had eliminated long ago. It was a tiny spark of doubt buried deep in his logical mind. His calculations were perfect. His data was complete, and yet something did not fit. Fleet Marshal stood alone on the observation deck of his ancient vessel, the memory of ages. He was the oldest of the five, and his memory stretched back further than any of them knew. He remembered things that had been erased from the history books. He remembered enemies that the galaxy had forgotten. And now, looking out at the stars, he remembered something else. Long ago, before the hegemony existed, his ancestors had encountered a species much like the humans. They were small, weak, and primitive. They had no special abilities, no great technology, no ancient wisdom. By every measure, they should have been easy to conquer. But they were not. That species had fought with a fury that logic. They had sacrificed themselves in ways that made no sense. They had turned every weakness into a weapon and every defeat into a reason to fight harder. It had taken everything the Ascended had to destroy them. And even then, his ancestors had not been certain they had succeeded. He pushed the memory away. Humans were not that species. They could not be. That enemy was extinct. The galaxy was safe. But as he turned to leave the observation deck, gave one final order to his crew. Increase our scanner range. I want to know the moment anything moves in human space. What are we looking for, Fleet Marshal? Was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered with a word that his crew did not understand. Thunder. The hegemony began assembling its armada. 10,000 ships from all 5 species, gathering at the edge of human territory. It was the largest fleet they had ever created, not because they needed it, but because they wanted the universe to see their power. They would enter human space in perfect formation. They would march to Earth itself, and they would accept humanity's surrender in person. The 5 were certain of their victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the dark. The hegemony armada entered the Sol system like a river of death flowing through space. 10,000 ships stretched across the darkness, their hulls gleaming with the light of 100 different technologies. Hive ships moved in swarms, their organic forms pulsing with dark energy. Etherian vessels floated like silver ghosts, their surfaces shifting and changing with every moment. War cruisers bristled with weapons, each one covered in the symbols of 1,000 victories. Dreadnoughts moved with mechanical precision, their crews calculating every possible outcome. And at the center of them all, the ancient battleships of the Ascended hummed with power that was older than most civilizations. Commander stood on the bridge of the endless hunger and watched Earth grow larger on his. The blue and green world hung in space like a jewel, unprotected and alone. Where are their ships? He asked. Where are their defenses? His sensor officer checked the readings 3 times before answering. Nothing, Commander. There are no military vessels in the system. No orbital platforms, no weapon satellites. The planet is completely undefended. Clicked his mandibles in confusion. This made no sense. Even the weakest species tried to protect there. Even animals would fight to defend their nests. But humans had left Earth open to attack as if they did not care what happened to it. Perhaps they truly have surrendered, Admiral Anna said over the communication channel. Her voice was calm, but there was something uncertain in it. Perhaps they realized that resistance was pointless. Then where are they? Warlord Ash demanded. Where are their leaders? Where are the groveling politicians who will beg for our mercy? I came here for a conquest, not an empty world. High Arbiter answered from his position at the rear of the fleet. My calculations suggest that the human government has collapsed. They have likely descended into chaos and civil war. We will find nothing but broken societies and desperate survivors." Fleet Marshal said nothing. He was staring at his sensors with growing unease. Something was wrong with the readings. There was too much interference, too much static. It was as if something was disrupting the signals, something hidden in the darkness between the planets. "All ships maintain formation," ordered. "Move slowly, stay alert." "Stay alert for what?" Ash laughed. "There is nothing here but dust and rocks. The humans have run away like the cowards they are. Let us take their world and be done with it." The Armada continued its advance. They passed the outer planets without incident. They moved through the asteroid belt and found only silence. They approached Mars and saw abandoned colonies, empty domes, and cold machines. Earth was only hours away now. Victory was certain. The five began to relax. And then the stars began to move. Was the first to notice. A cluster of lights near Jupiter suddenly shifted position. He thought it was a sensor error at first. Then another cluster moved, and another, and another. "What is happening?" he demanded. "What am I seeing?" His sensor officer went pale. "Commander, those are not stars, they are ships, thousands of ships. They were hiding in the radiation shadow of Jupiter. They are moving toward us." All across the Armada, similar reports began flooding in. Ships were appearing everywhere. Behind moons, inside asteroid fields, hiding in the dust clouds around Saturn. They had been waiting in the cold and the dark, their engines silent, their systems dormant. They had been invisible to hegemony sensors because they had been pretending to be rocks and debris. Now they were waking up. Admiral Anna felt a wave of shock wash through the psionic field as her crew realized what was happening. "How many?" she whispered. "How many ships are there?" Her officer's voice was shaking. 30,000 contacts and counting, Admiral. They outnumber us 3-1. "That is impossible," said. His calculations were crumbling around him. Humans did not have the industrial capacity to build such a fleet. They could not have hidden this from our intelligence networks. This cannot be happening. But it was happening. The human fleet assembled itself with perfect coordination. Ships that had been scattered across the entire system moved into formation as if guided by a single mind. They were not the crude vessels that the five had mocked. They were something new. These ships were larger, faster, and more heavily armed than anything humans had built before. Their hulls were covered in strange armor that seemed to shift and adapt. Their weapons glowed with energy signatures that hegemony sensors could not identify. They moved through space with a grace that seemed impossible for such primitive creatures. And at the center of the human formation, a single vessel emerged that made even Warlord Ash fall silent. It was a ship twice the size of anything in the hegemony fleet. Its hull was black as space itself, broken only by lines of glowing blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Weapons covered every surface. Engines burned at its rear like captured stars. It moved with the slow confidence of a predator that knew it could not be stopped. The name painted on its hull was visible even from across the void. UNSS Defiance. A communication channel opened. Every ship in both fleets received the same message at the same moment. A human woman appeared on their screens. She was not tall. She was not physically impressive. She wore a simple uniform with no medals or decorations. But her eyes held something that made the five uncomfortable. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "I am Admiral of the United Nations Space Command," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You sent us an ultimatum 3 months ago. You demanded our surrender. You threatened our destruction. You laughed at our ships and called us primitives." She paused and looked directly at the screen, as if she could see every alien commander watching her. "We received your message. We chose not to respond with words. We chose to respond with this." The human fleet completed its formation. 30,000 ships faced 10,000. The largest military force humanity had ever assembled was ready for battle. Admiral smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You wanted to teach us our place in the galaxy. Allow us to teach you something instead. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. And when someone threatens our home, we do not hide." She leaned forward slightly, and her next words were spoken with absolute certainty. "We build, we prepare, and then we answer." The channel closed, and across the void, the human fleet began its advance. The Battle of Saul had begun. The first shots were fired at exactly 1400 hours, Saul's standard time. Commander ordered his hive ships forward, confident that his swarm tactics would overwhelm the human formation. They had perfected this strategy over thousands of years. They would send waves of smaller vessels to confuse enemy sensors, then strike with their larger ships while the enemy was distracted. It had never failed before. The swarm rushed toward the human lines, thousands of small craft moving in perfect synchronization. They expected the humans to scatter, to break formation and try to fight the swarm individually. That was what every other species had done. The humans did something different. A wall of nuclear explosions erupted directly in front of the human fleet. The blasts created a barrier of radiation and electromagnetic chaos that blinded every sensor instantly. The swarm flew into the barrier and lost all coordination. Ships crashed into each other. Navigation systems failed. Communication networks collapsed. And then the human ships opened fire. They did not use the elegant energy weapons of the hegemony. They used kinetic accelerators that fired chunks of metal at nearly the speed of light. They used missiles that carried warheads designed to penetrate organic hulls. They used weapons that were brutal and simple and devastatingly effective. Watched in horror as his swarm was torn apart. Ships exploded by the hundreds. The radiation from the nuclear barrier meant his crews could not even see what was killing them. They died blind and confused, never understanding what had happened. "Fall back," screamed. "All ships fall back." But it was too late. The human fleet pushed through the barrier and into the scattered remains of the swarm. Its flagship, the Endless Hunger, took 7 direct hits in the first minute of combat. Its organic hull tried to heal itself, but the damage was too severe. Send a final message to the other commanders. They fight without honor, they fight without rules, they fight like... The transmission ended as the Endless Hunger broke apart. Admiral Anna felt die. The psychic scream of 10,000 minds ending at once washed over her like a wave of fire. She stumbled and nearly fell from her command chair. "We must break their morale," she said to her crew. "Flood their minds with fear, make them see their worst nightmares, make them want to surrender." The Etherian fleet focused its psionic power on the human ships. Anna herself led the assault, pouring all her mental strength into the attack. She expected to feel human minds crumbling under the pressure. She expected to feel terror and despair spreading through their fleet. She felt nothing. The human ships continued to advance. Their crews kept fighting. Their weapons kept firing. It was as if the psionic attack had never happened. "How is this possible?" Anna demanded. "No species can resist our power." The answer came from her science officer. "Admiral, they have lined their hulls with psi-dampening material. Our sensors show it matches Etherian shield technology. They have turned our own defenses against us." Before Anna could respond, alarms screamed across her bridge. Human boarding pods had attached to her flagship. Airlocks were being breached. Armed figures were entering the ship. Human Marines. They moved through the corridors of the Whisper of Eternity with terrifying efficiency. They did not hesitate. They did not show fear. And worst of all, Anna could not touch their minds at all. They existed in complete psionic silence, ghosts of flesh and metal that killed without warning. Anna tried to flee to the escape pods. She made it halfway before a human soldier stepped out of the shadows and raised his weapon. She reached out with her mind, trying to stop him, trying to make him see something that was not there. He fired anyway. Her last thought was that she had never touched a single human mind in her entire life. Warlord Ash roared with fury as he watched his allies fall. They were scattered. The Etherians were dying. Only the remained true warriors. "All ships close to combat range," he ordered. "We will crush them with our superior firepower. We will show them what it means to face the..." His war cruisers surged forward, eager for battle. They had always been strongest in close combat, where their heavy armor and powerful weapons could overwhelm any enemy. They wanted to get close enough to see the fear in human eyes. They never got the chance. The human fleet launched a wave of missiles unlike anything Ash had ever seen. They were small and fast, and there were thousands of them. His ships tried to shoot them down, but the missiles changed course constantly, dodging defensive fire with impossible precision. "They are controlled by machines," his tactical officer reported. The missiles think for themselves. They learn from our defenses and adapt in real time. Ash watched as the missiles found their targets. His cruisers were built for close combat, not for fighting enemies they could not reach. Ship after ship exploded as the missiles tore through their armor. His own flagship shook as the first impacts hit, then the second, then the third. The bridge began to collapse around him. "This is not war," Ash said quietly. "This is slaughter." The 47th missile destroyed his ship completely. High Arbiter watched the battle through streams of data. His logical mind tried to process what was happening, tried to find patterns and predictions, but nothing made sense. Human ships were sacrificing themselves to protect damaged allies. Crews were staying at their posts even when their vessels were burning around them. Captains were ramming their crippled ships into hegemony vessels rather than surrendering. And on the open communication channels, the humans were singing. Could not understand it. His species had removed emotion from their minds because they believed it was a weakness. But these humans were fighting with something that all logic. They were fighting with passion and fury and love for each other. His calculations updated one final time as plasma began melting through his bridge. Probability of hegemony victory, 0%. Cause of defeat, unknown variable. Classification, human. Fleet Marshal watched from the rear of the fleet as the hegemony collapsed around him. They were gone. The Etherians were gone. They were gone. They were gone. Only a handful of ascended ships remained. And still the humans came. Finally understood what his ancient memory had been trying to tell him. His ancestors had faced a species like this once before. They had been small and weak and primitive. They had been outnumbered and they had nearly destroyed the Ascended entirely. That species had been called humanity's cousins by the old records. Some had even believed they were related. Now knew the truth. Humans were not like that ancient enemy. They were worse. He opened a channel to the hegemony and spoke a single word. "Run." Then he turned his remaining ships toward the human fleet, knowing he would not survive, hopping only to buy time for others to escape. The Battle of Saul ended 11 hours after it began. Of 10,000 hegemony ships, fewer than 800 escaped. The human fleet did not pursue them. They had made their point. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The hegemony of 5 had been broken. Their greatest armada had been destroyed. All 5 of their supreme commanders were dead. And humanity, the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak, was now the most feared military power in known space. The Hive Queens gathered in their deepest chambers and tried to understand what had happened. They had lost commander and nearly half their military fleet. Their swarm tactics, which had conquered 100 species, had failed completely against human weapons. "What do we do now?" the youngest queen asked. The eldest queen was silent for a long moment. "We wait," she finally said. "We wait and see what the humans want." On the Etherian, the psionic councils met in emergency session. They had lost Admiral Anna and their belief that they were the masters of the mind. Humans had found a way to block their greatest weapon. Humans had killed Etherians without ever being touched by their powers. "Perhaps we should attempt communication," one council member suggested. "Perhaps we should try to understand them." "Understand them," another member replied. "They are blind to the psionic field. They cannot be understood. They can only be feared." On the fortress worlds, the surviving warriors buried their dead and sharpened their weapons. They had lost Warlord Ash and thousands of their best fighters, but they did not despair. They respected strength above all things. "The humans are strong," the new war chief declared. "Stronger than we believed. This does not make them our enemies. It makes them worthy of respect." The logical minds tried to process their defeat. They had lost High Arbiter and their faith in pure calculation. Humans had proven that there were things in the universe that could not be predicted by numbers alone. "We must update our models," the new High Arbiter announced. "We must create new variables. We must learn what makes humans different." And on the ancient vessels of the Ascended, Fleet Marshal's final message was played again and again. The eldest species in the hegemony understood what the younger races did not. They had seen this before. They knew what humans represented. "They are not like us," the Ascended elders agreed. "They are something else, something we forgot could exist, something we thought we had destroyed long ago." What should we call them? A younger Ascended asked. The eldest of them all answered with a word from the ancient language, a word that had not been spoken in 50,000 years. Survivors. 3 months after the Battle of Saul, human ships appeared in the skies of every hegemony world. They did not come with weapons firing. They did not come with demands for surrender. They came with a simple message. Admiral delivered it personally, appearing on every screen in every city on every planet. We did not ask for this war, she said. We did not want it. We were happy to live in peace, to trade with our neighbors, to explore the stars alongside other species. But you gave us no choice. You demanded our submission. You threatened our extinction. You laughed at us and called us weak. She paused, and her eyes seemed to look at every being watching her. We are not here for revenge. We are not here to conquer. We are not here to do to you what you planned to do to us. We are here to offer you something that you never offered us. A choice. You can choose peace. You can accept us as equals. You can trade with us fairly and respect our borders as we will respect yours. Or you can choose to test us again. You can rebuild your fleets and come for our worlds once more. Her expression hardened. We advise peace, because if you choose war, we will be ready. We will always be ready. We are humanity. We do not forget threats. We do not forgive attacks on our homes, and we do not lose twice. The message ended, and across the galaxy, the former hegemony made its choice. One by one, the great powers accepted humanity's terms. Trade agreements replaced threats. Ambassadors replaced soldiers. Borders were drawn and respected. It was not friendship, it was not trust, but it was peace. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. On Earth, celebrations filled the streets of every city. Humanity had faced extinction and survived. They had stood against the most powerful alliance in the galaxy and won. Children would grow up knowing that their species had earned its place among the stars. But there was also mourning. In the Great Hall of the United Nations Space Command, a wall had been built to honor those who had fallen. It was covered with names. Ships and crews who had given everything so that humanity could survive. Fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, friends and lovers who would never come home. Admiral stood before that wall alone, after the ceremonies had ended and the crowds had gone home. She found one name among the thousands and touched it gently. UNSS Steadfast, Captain, her brother. He had been commanding a destroyer when the hegemony fleet broke through the human lines. The Defiance had been exposed, its shields failing, had ordered his ship between the flagship and the enemy guns. The Steadfast had taken 11 direct hits before it finally died. The Defiance had survived, Admiral had survived, and now she stood in victory while her brother lay in the cold of space. A reporter found her there as she was leaving. He asked her the question that everyone wanted answered. Admiral, how did humanity achieve the impossible? How did we defeat an enemy that outmatched us in every way? Was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at the reporter and gave him an answer that would be repeated for generations. They looked at our ships and saw weakness. They looked at our technology and saw primitives. They looked at our numbers and saw easy prey. But they never looked at our hearts. They never looked at our history. They never understood that humanity has been fighting impossible battles since we first stood up on the plains of Africa. She gestured at the wall of names behind her. We survive because we refuse to do anything else. We win because losing is not something we accept. And we will always find a way because that is what humans do. The reporter asked one final question. What happens now, Admiral? What is humanity's place in the galaxy? Smiled. It was the same smile she had given the hegemony before the battle began. Our place is wherever we choose to stand, and now the galaxy knows the price of trying to move us. She walked away, leaving the reporter alone with the wall of names. Across the stars, in the courts and councils of 100 species, a new saying began to spread. It was whispered by warriors and scholars, by rulers and servants, by everyone who had learned the truth about the small, short-lived, psi-blind mammals of Earth. Never mock a human, they take it personally. And in the darkness between the stars, humanity continued to build. Just in case,